Ooh, we're heading into it. Short stream, short video. Hey everybody, how you doing? We're on a bit of a time crunch with this one, just because dinner hasn't been had yet, and me and the beautiful fiance gotta go to eat. But yes, I wanted to do this. I've been wanting to do this for a while. I didn't think it would take up an entire 2 hours of a stream, but I thought it could take up like an hour or 45 minutes. But my name is Matthew. You can call me Newfable. We just got done reading through Between Clouds, which is an indie TTRPG. The VOD's immediately available on my YouTube channel as well. You can get there from Twitch. You can get there from Twitter. Any of the posts that I make, I'll usually link to both my Twitch and my YouTube channels. I just do a lot of live stuff. But these, every now and again, I like to read indie TTRPGs and like gain a first impressions of them. And that's what that was. We got a first impressions of Between Clouds. It's just how the game system works, just kind of like reading through the book real quick, scanning through it, spending a lot of time on the lore section, admittingly, because it's fucking great. And learning how the game ran. I'm a fan of it, but I will let you be the judge of that. If you'd like to go, I'd appreciate you, watching the content, watching the video, and making a comment if you would like to. It's a long one, but you can leave it on in the background and just kind of enjoy yourself, or look at the beautiful artwork, because it's fucking gorgeous. As is this, because today we're looking back at Fabula Ultima. A while back, we took a look at various game systems. I wanted to take a look at Fabula Ultima. It was a game system that I was a big fan of. I heard that it was a TTJRPG simulator when it first came out. I said, I'm kind of in. How do I get it? You could order it online. Thankfully, I had to get mine from Amazon because it wasn't available anywhere else. Got me a physical copy and also bought a PDF. And I started running games of it. I did a Let's Read of that as well. I was a little familiar with the system, so I did a Let's Read of it. The beautiful fiance was kind enough to sit with me for a session of it and kind of like make a character, or really make a character that she knew, Sora from Kingdom Hearts, which we could make in Fabula Ultima, and you can very easily. And then kind of make a character for herself based on like her style of play and all that, which was real helpful because shortly after that I started running games of this professionally, where at a local cafe, players can come in and sit down and play a game, learn how to play the game and all of that. And she made up character very easily, and because she already had her hands on the system of that as well. But I learned how to like introduce new players to the system and all that, and I have some thoughts about it. But if you have any questions about Fabula Ultima at all, feel free to ask, and I will give you the best answer that I possibly can. My credentials, again, are a game master that is game master professionally. I've been running games for about 5 years, not professionally. I've been doing that for maybe about a year, maybe close to a year. I've been running games unprofessionally, just as a hobby and a passion, for maybe about 4.5, 5 years at this point. And I just like being a game master. I like it. I really enjoy it. I like creating my own stuff and all that as well. I just found a passion for it. And so these videos are kind of based and colored off of my experiences being a game master, but also consuming a lot of content from other game masters. More notably, Matthew Mercer, Abria Iyengar, and Brennan Lee Mulligan are some of my biggest inspirations for how to GM, how my style of game mastering works. And this is artwork from the Game Master section of the Fabula Ultima book. We'll take a quick tour through this and talk about this chapter and like generally running stuff and my experiences with the system as a game master. Having actually gotten my hands on it, no longer just like first impressions or, oh, I flipped through this, let me read it. First of all, I do like that right at the beginning it says no one is born a game master. Let me actually embiggen this so that folks can actually read this on whatever device you might be looking at. These pieces are very white. No one is born a game master. I like that. Take mistakes and learn from your experiences. Get the entire group involved. Combine all this with the advice provided through this chapter. By doing this, will help everyone both enjoy playing the game and developing an incredible story. Yes. Just do it. Just Game Master stuff. You are not going to be perfect. Your first time might even be bad, and that is okay. Take that advice that the player... Ask for advice. Take that advice to heart. Learn what you could improve upon. And learn what you did well. That you can kind of entrench yourself in. And the more you run games too, the more you're going to find your style of running games. The kind of way you like to run them. The kind of stories you like to tell. I'm going to be drinking a lot of water. I've been talking for about 2.5 hours straight. Okay. So the Game Master's role, we kind of already know this. Learn the rules, gather inspiration from stuff, take a look at different classes. This part is really important. This stuff is a big part of this. I would say more than any other TTRPG. Because any other RPG, you want to learn the rules of it, you want to get inspiration from other sources of media and books, music, artwork, anime if you really want to, anything that you really want to, and piece it and cobble it together to kind of help you tell a story. More than anything, though, and this is because I think it's in the next sessions, or maybe it's in the class details. I think it is in the class details. You want to take a look at the different classes and understand why players have chosen those different classes. Case in point. Player wants to play a roguish character in this game, and they look at the rogue class bucket of skills they can choose from, and they see soul steal, which allows them to steal items from enemies. And they go, that is bitchin', I want that. Well, perfect. They can use that to get an inventory point from enemies, right? They can roll a die, and if they're successful, they can take an inventory point. Or maybe a couple of zenith or what have you. Maybe 10 zenith, which is enough for an inventory point. They can get that kind of stuff from enemies, but soul steal allows you to take powerful equipment from enemies. They'll have it on their person, and you can just take it and pluck it. It's the only way to get it. And so by learning about that as a game master, that will inform you to be okay, when I put elite enemies or champions in front of my players, they should have some gear that this one player can take, right? Because they're going to take it off of them and probably try to use it during the fight. They probably won't be able to, but will inevitably be what cool shit did we find? It also means that by learning about that, you understand there's not going to be a whole lot of gear or stuff on enemies for players to find necessarily. Or if there is, it's less. Or it's what originally would have been on them in the first place that the rogue could steal from. So they can either steal in combat or kind of get that stuff afterwards or what have you. Same is true for a spiritualist. Why that player is playing a spiritualist. Or a tinkerer, where they get access to projects and they might want to do that. Or what's another one? Lore Master, which is a class that's you get information. You get a bunch of information all the time. Learning those classes is going to inform what your players have told you is important through their class choices, which will inform the stuff you want to focus on when you're running the game. More than any other TTRPG that I've run, this is important here. Because you don't really need to learn all the different classes if you want to run D&D. You just kind of want to learn what it is your players are gravitating towards, because the class is going to determine their play style, not necessarily their role play. During session 0, which is real important because this is when you're building stuff, help everyone else. So offer information, offer ideas. You're not here to tell them a story, you're here to help them write their own. Very important. Very, very important. Don't hang on to, have a loose grip on BBEGs. Have a loose grip on plot points that you need your players to get through. If they're not interested in that stuff, let it go. More importantly, be ready to grab onto the important shit that your players are telling you about. The things they're gravitating towards. They're going to let you know what those are, especially if you ask for them. Grab those. It's also just easier work for you. Ask questions. I would say ask leading questions. leading questions is always going to be better because that also stirs the creative juices, like we see down here. So like leading questions are being like, player describes this fantastic city that they're from. Their origin is this massive tree that they've carved into and carved apartments into and houses and all of this stuff, and it's amazing. They're in tune with nature, they're in tune with all this stuff. Leading question is, well, then why did you leave? You're not here now, so why did you leave that paradise? Or an even better one is just kind of assuming something and then asking the player about it. Like, okay, that place sounds perfect. So what's wrong with it? Or why is it dying? And something like that will make the player go, oh, and they'll start thinking about things in a different way that helps them to think creatively to answer that question that there really is no wrong answer to, except for no. No, that's not a question I want to answer. Think about threats and villains. Also really good. Your player should be going against the villains or the machinations of the villains, often and frequently. So I would say, like, when your players tell you how they want to play, the themes they want to go through, the world they're trying to build, as you're making villains, you want to kind of create plots for them and have the players interact with those plots. Or it can be something straight out of Final Fantasy II, where like immediately you're like, yeah, the Emperor, he's the bad guy. You're gonna run into this guy a lot. Like, often and frequently. That town, taken by the Emperor. This skyship, owned by the Emperor. You know, this threat over here, this summoning thing, yeah, the Emperor's doing that. And then keep track of changes. This too, good GM advice. Just kind of like want to keep notes or a wiki or something of some kind. Like whenever something changes, the world should have some kind of consequence to it. Start things off with a bang. You can, yeah. Don't be afraid to set some high stakes during the prologue. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, pulling from Final Fantasy, the raid on Midgar, the raid on the reactor in Midgar, high stakes immediately. Just like, yep, we're here in media res. You got a couple party members that already know each other, and go! And you're off to the races. So yeah, I wouldn't be afraid to do something like that either. You definitely can. Like they kind of mention here, like, talk to your players about where they could potentially start at. Kind of like the last game that we read through, Between Clouds. Try to see if you can ask your players like where they might be in session 0, where things might go, so that the transition to session 1 is a hell of a lot easier. Because then the players are saying like, no, we're here doing this thing, and you just go, great. They've made your session, the beginning of session 1 for you already. They've already told you this is what's going to interest us. Portray a wondrous world. Yes, high fantasy should be high. Yeah, try to make like as many memorable details as you can. If possible, if something like this is a real big help to game masters, but I would make like keyword lists. Make lists of keywords for certain locations or locales or things like that to trigger your imagination or trigger your sense of improv to yes and riff off of these words that you've made yourself. And just go high with it. Go high fantasy. Go crazy. Manage information. Yep, that's a thing. Seek input from others. Yes, absolutely. React to the hero's choices. Yes. This is probably one of the harder things about being a game master. You just kind of have to react to whatever the hell it is your players are doing. And when they do some crazy shit, you have to be like, okay, that's gonna happen. It's gonna do this thing. It's gonna occur this way, and yeah, it's just gonna be that way. Enforce transparency. This is also really good. This is something a lot of game masters don't necessarily do. Not because it's bad or you shouldn't, or it's this weird sense of responsibility. I found a lot of game masters and myself when I started had to keep everything very secret. And you do not have to do that. Letting your players know immediately, like, hey, this is how you get a level up. Or hey, this reward does this thing here. Is just going to allow your players to manage the information that they have better. Gatekeeping that behind them needing to mine away at your game master's screen to get behind it and get a little bit of information can be fun if all your players want to do that. But if that's not something that they're interested in, then just be transparent with like what you're doing or monster abilities or what's happening or occurring. Keep the pressure high. Yeah. I would say when the pressure is on. You don't have to keep it high all the time. That can lead to a lot of burnout. But yeah, when the pressure's on, keep it on. And design interesting battles. Avoid filler battles. This is really easy to do with the system. Really easy to do. Phenomenally easy, because creating monsters is so dingly-dangled easy in Fabula Ultima. And creating stuff for players to interact with is easy with the clock system, because you just say, yeah, this thing over here can easily happen. It's like a 2 or 3 turn clock. It's going to take you 2 actions to do it. Either one of you needs to do it, or anybody can do it, and when it resolves, this thing happens. Which is also transparency as well. It allows players to make decisions that they can understand easier. But yeah, this, real easy to do. Designing interesting battles, real easy to do in this system. It's one of the reasons why I really like it. Between sessions, think about the hero's choices. Yep, that's just a prep for next session. What do they want to do? Where are they going? Prep for that. Think about what the villains are doing. That's, again, all like in the background. And half the time you don't even have to think about what they're doing, because you're going to have villain scenes that might showcase what they're doing, or at least part of what they're doing. And that can inform what you start planning. So it could be a great way to think aloud and reward your players for letting you play with your action figures a bit at the table. Ask the players what their goals and objectives are. Yeah, be candid. For any TTRPG, not just this one. Just be candid. Ask them like, hey, what are you doing? Where are you going? What do you want? That can be such a huge help for game masters to just be like, okay, I'm just going to make this thing and do that thing. Design new creatures. Again, super easy. Super easy to do. And look for inspiration. Yes, as you go and do stuff. Look for different things that pique your interest. Yes, this is what we were talking about before, like character classes. So, like, again, you have somebody as a, we talked about rogue. Soul steal ability allows them to get precious items. So said items should tell a story about the creature. Don't be afraid to get the player characters some new toys. Like, because they have this, they're going to want to use this. Or even then, like, most people will be wary of helping a rogue. But if they belong to a criminal guild or organization, they can have their secret language or hideouts or things like that. Like, these are things that might be important to a rogue player. So as a game master, this section is invaluable to understand, like, what your player is really going to gel with if they chose some of these classes to have abilities from. What they're really going to be like, oh yeah, I really want to do that thing. Like that, it's just like, this is what they're probably going to find interesting. The arts of villains. Goals, minor, major, supreme villains. Yeah, like, minor is stealing a magical artifact or getting control of a villain. Supreme villains are like becoming a deity, doing crazy shit, all that stuff. And villains can escalate as well. They can become a minor to a major to a supreme. They'll usually only go up by 1, although you could have like a BBEG that's kind of like a Team Rocket kind of thing, right? Like, they're the bumbling idiots that they keep coming across, but they use all but 1 Ultima point. They'll use like the penultimate one to like run away, and then they get a powerful artifact and escalate to major villains. And so now they're still dealing with the players, and then even then they run away, and then they're the ones. These bumbling idiots are, at the end of the day, like, dragging gods down to their level to consume their power and use them and stuff. So you can do some cool shit with that. Pressure. You must always communicate pressure, like whenever a villain's plans advance. Yes, this is important to do. With an appropriate game master scene or through rumors or things. Don't surprise players with this. I agree. Generally want to ensure that, like, your players know, like, yeah, by the way, this has occurred. Or this is occurring. This is something that these villains are doing and working towards. Minor, major, and supreme villains have, like, different clocks, and I would say that's the number of sessions for their plan to succeed. This is also a great way to keep the pressure up. Like, if you're introducing a villain, they want something, hey, they'll complete that in 4 sessions. So try to stop them from doing that. Because if your players don't, or they do something else entirely different, now you've got fuel for villain scenes to describe what it is the villains are doing, and that they're doing those things so that when it completes and the villains get that stuff, your players aren't surprised. It's like, oh, they just did that thing. It was like, well, we have no inclination to go and help them. That's where role-play and planning comes into play. Like, a lot of the stuff, the NPCs you build, the locations you build, encounters you build, might point the party towards what the villains are doing and what you're narrating through Game Master scenes, so that the players have an attachment to be like, oh yeah, we want to try to stop that. That's something we want to try to stop from doing. Unexpected side, yeah, villains should be deep, not two-dimensional. The Dark Mirror. Yeah, while the heroes are a group, the antagonist feels alone and abandoned. While the heroes fight for justice, the antagonist now believes justice is an illusion. While the heroes are willing to give up their life for the cause, the antagonist is frightened by death. While the heroes represent hope, the antagonist represents despair. Yeah, and this is just a good way to write antagonists. Antagonists can be different from the protagonists. They can be at opposite ends. This is often called foils in writing or narrative theory, where, like, the antagonist and protagonist are opposites of each other to a degree, or good complements to one another because they might help fulfill each other's wants and needs, but they're opposed. And so that's where a lot of tension and dramatic irony come from. And then style and mannerism, just thinking about their styles and stuff. Conflict abilities, yes. Are they elites or champions? This gets to, like, the nitty-gritty of, like, are they resistant to anything? Are they doing anything? Powerful antagonists might also be protected by a plot armor that prevents player characters from fighting them unless they have a specific item, spell, or other assets. You don't want to overdo this. One or two such tricks over the course of the entire campaign are more than enough. Yes. And then a dramatic entrance. Yep, absolutely. That's always good. Ham it up. Because again, high fantasy is very high, very big, very boisterous. So yeah, having a villain that just walks in and hams it up. The Sephiroth standing in a gout of fire and then giving you a smirk and walking through it. Like, yeah. It's a great entrance, yes. Absolutely go bonkers and bananas. And then dungeons. Dungeons are interesting. I found that Theater of the Mind already works really well with encounters in Fabula Ultima. So having dungeons be Theater of the Mind is also a pretty good idea. It's a pretty good thing to do. But even then, if you're drawing it out, Fabula Ultima's system is easy enough where you can say, like, yeah, there's a secret door here. It's like a difficulty, a DC or a DL of 10. Or I think the other one, next one is like 15 or 13 or something like that. Right? Like, just to determine where it is. And at that point, players will tell you, like, how they're checking for this area. So you've got the difficulty level already, and then your players are telling you how they're doing it. That informs the check. So you don't have to write, like, insight, or, you know, like a skill in Pathfinder in D&D. Gotta make a perception check. Gotta make a spot hidden check. Gotta make a sleight of hand check or anything like that. Like, you just set the DC and you're good at that point, and that's fine. I would say the more detailed you want it to be, the less linear you want it to be, then yeah, you probably want a detailed dungeon. There's a lot of talk through this section as well of whether it should be detailed or not. Prepared dungeon allows for all three modes of exploration. Where most of the time you'll rely on dungeon scenes or detailed exploration, but if the layout of the place is important, you might even get it done with an interlude scene. An improvised dungeon will rarely allow for detailed exploration. Generally fall in the middle between dungeon scenes and interludes, and dungeon scenes are literally like rooms in a dungeon. You find yourself in this room, there are things here, and an interlude scene might be you just kind of get through the area. It's not necessarily this big, huge thing. Yeah, cut to the chase. Mention the most important details, cut to the chase. But yeah, that's kind of it. It's fairly easy to prep for it. Like they say, like, make it functional, make it have an idea behind it, carry that idea through the entire dungeon, place rewards in it. And this is a good one too. They might be magic items, currency, or even inventory points. Yes, inventory points make for great rewards. Everything in Fabula Ultima boils down to inventory points. HP you need. If you run out, you're removed from the scene. But you get some Fabula points, so that's neat. Mind points or MP are great because they'll restore HP, but that's a finite resource. And so you'll need inventory points to refill mind points or to just heal you and restore hit points. But if you run out of inventory points, then the person healing you with spells or magic might run out of mind points and now they can't anymore. Or people just using more mundane potions now have run out. And so there's what you have is what you got. So inventory points, like running the game with the encounter system that they have, which I think we'll kind of skip this dungeon stuff and get to, is real important. Because players after a while will be like, we need to rest, not because we don't have the stuff necessary, but because we're running out of IP. We're running out of inventory points. Like we're running out of batteries. Dungeon archive. This is just like preparing dungeons in advance, just having that stuff available, being flexible and stuff. If you really like doing this, or you have programs that let you do this, this is a real easy way to make that kind of stuff. And the rewards, this is a good reward table to do. This pretty much says here, like, at the beginning of the game, you're probably going to start here at this level. Ooh. So they say, hey, if you're, like level 5 or higher, the maximum item value that a single item should have should be about 500 Zene or Zenit. Otherwise, if you've got 2 player characters, an average reward is 500 Zenit, 3 is 750, and 4 is 1,000. So the average reward for the example they use here is an average reward for a group of 5 level 26 characters. So we're looking at this one right here. The average reward is going to be about 2,000 Zenit, and no single item should have a value higher than 1,500. And these are like big rewards, right? So small rewards can be like some inventory points or some Zenit or stuff like that. If you hide a magical item in a dungeon, the qualities on it shouldn't be any higher than 500, which I think we'll get to. And the average reward should kind of be like, this is good standard rewards, because that's more than enough money to like buy inventory points again, refill on that, buy extra weapons and accessories and things that they want, or even like put down money for like powerful artifacts or crafting their own items as well, which you can do and get to. And yeah, on average, the chart that they give you there is based on the idea that you'll receive approximately 1 reward per session in every 4 or 5 hours of play. Not a hard rule, not a hard fast rule, but the idea is like, yeah, every session players might get 1,000 Zenit to the party, and then they can do whatever they like with it. If they're spending money too fast or loose, you can write it back. If they aren't, you can give them more to be like, hey, spend this, use this. And then interesting rewards. This is really easy as well. You can hand stuff out, you can give them stuff that ask for surveys, all of that. Rogues and Soul Steal is again like magic items and things. Designing magic items though is actually kind of easy, because there's just qualities that some of these things will have, and then you can put them on an item and they just have that item. So someone has like a katana and they want that katana to be awesome and cool. Okay, it's a magical katana. What does that do? Targets magic defense instead of defense. Generally, magic defense is lower than defense. So having a magical weapon, unlike D&D or Pathfinder that gets you like +1s to hit, will instead make it generally easier to hit because that person's probably got worse magic defense. If they're magical in nature, then more mundane stuff is going to work. Or like Hunter, it deals 5 extra damage to creatures of a particular species, right? To like monsters or elementals or beasts or humanoids or things like that. Piercing damage dealt by the weapon ignores resistances. So it's like stuff like that can be really, really good. Or to one or Dual Hunter. So this stuff is great, especially for like weapons and gear and stuff that players really want to like up their offensive capabilities. You can even attach defensive qualities to even like weapons, but this is also great for armor as well. And these are more expensive just because survivability is huge in this game. Fights are tough. Fights are deadly. They can be very deadly. You know, like a caster can be taken out in 2 hits. Most casters that I've put in a fight, they get in a fight, an enemy randomly targets them, hits them, deals average damage, and that player is like, I'm in crisis. Like, 1 more hit and I'm out, and I'm gone. So having stuff that makes them immune to status effects, or even like a +1 to defense, is incredible. And the nice thing here too is you can just kind of double this up. So a +2 to defense would be 1600 Zenith. +3 to defense would be, what would that be? 24, 2400 Zenith. You know, same like Omni Shield, get a +1 bonus to defense and magic defense. While +2 would cost you 4000. Things like that. So you could easily just kind of like double this stuff up. Same with this, like 300 was 5 extra damage to 1 particular species. 500 is now 2. So you do 700 to do 3, or so on and so forth. So these are here, and they add that quality to what they're doing. But even then, this chart here, designing rare weapons on page 268, says that you can use a basic weapon if you want it to deal a different kind of damage other than physical, increase its cost by 100 Zenith for the purposes of buying or just figuring out its worth as a reward to give. If it's a 2-handed weapon, you can turn it into a 1-handed weapon and reduce its damage by 4. If it's a 1-handed, you can turn it into a 2-handed by increasing its damage by 4. You can add a +1 bonus to the accuracy check. Its cost is increased by 100. And you cannot add this bonus if the weapon already gives a bonus of +1 or higher. I would say you could, but you could make that exponentially harder. So like it costs 100, and then after that it costs, you know, like 500, and then after that 2000 or what have you to get +1, +2, +3, whatever you feel. Or stick with this, because a +1 to accuracy checks is actually pretty damn big. You can increase the weapon's damage by 4, increase its cost by 200. And then you can modify the attributes required by the accuracy check. Because that's more of a feel. Accuracy checks relying on a single attribute are worth 50% or 50 more Zenith. So something that's insight and insight, or dexterity and dexterity. And then the qualities we're looking at says like you may give the weapon a single quality. And if the weapon has a final damage modifier +10 or higher, it automatically becomes a martial weapon. Meaning you require a specific class to even be able to wield it. So yeah, you would give like pluses to damage or bonuses or things like that, real easy to do, and then like you can add a quality, and now it's even more expensive, and now it's worth even more. It's a great way to just create stuff. And then there's a bunch of like simple ones, so you can look at a lot of these to just be like, yep, this is what this is. Like Blessed Mace is just a 1-handed melee weapon. It uses just willpower twice and does light damage, and that's it. And you can even see that would be based on, let's go here real quick for character creation. Let's go to classic characters here. So like a staff is probably what that would be. It's willpower and willpower. HR6, it's 2-handed, costs 100. But now we go in here, where was the designing rare weapons. This one, same thing, willpower, +2, so it deals a little less, but it deals light damage. So you just increase the cost by 100, and that's it. The same with this one, like Ars Gotica. It's insight, +6, and you get a +2 to magic checks against demons, and +2 opposed checks against demons. So something like that is just a little costly, but not by much. These are great, like, qualities to have, and then you can just kind of assume the cost and make it something else. Like, it doesn't have to be a staff that gets you a +1 bonus to magic checks. It can be a book. Has the same effect, costs the same amount of Zenith, has the same checks to it if you really want to. And just kind of like mess with the price like they do on these other pages. and just kind of mix and match the price, bring it up, bring it down. It's a really good way to like look for qualities and be like, yes, I absolutely love this kind of stuff. I like the way this works. Brawling weapons, yep, same thing here. Dagger weapons, all sorts of sample rare weapons and all of that. And they have the same thing with armors. You could do the same thing there. Pick one from like the list that already exists, and then add a single quality to it. So you have resistance to certain things, or resistance to physical damage, to physical damage types, all sorts of stuff that you can do. And then like +4 to initiative modifiers, accuracy checks, which is great to hit stuff. Weapons deal 5 extra damage. And so this is where, because Fabula Ultima is a system that seeks to emulate a JRPG, you can absolutely have gear that like you get a plus to hit from your armor, a plus to hit from your weapon, and an accessory that gives you plus to hit. So you're adding like +3 because all of your gear is decked out to do it. So a lot of endgame stuff would be players like making or creating different kinds of gear to like accentuate one piece of gear having all the pluses, and then other pieces of gear doing other stuff. In all sorts of different ways, like armor of heroes, and then weird shit like maid uniform or butler uniform. All sorts of wacky shit. That's the basic idea for like designing that, and accessories as well. Same thing here. Defensive qualities, enhancement qualities. Yeah, absolutely. Really good, easy system of doing it where you can just be like, yep, this is a thing. Real nice, real easy. Because you just attach it and go, that's how much then it costs. Perfect. Like all these pendants, you have resistance to that kind of thing. They all cost 700. Easy. Easy, easy, easy. It'll +1 bonus to magic defense. Yep, it's a ring. Or, you know, because it's an accessory. 800. Sure. Why not? Or it could be gloves. Or it could be a hat. Or, you know, a hat of sorcery. Or it could be eyeglasses. You know, or a bookmark. Or whatever you want it to be. Just has that effect. Yeah. Nice and easy. Artifacts are a little bigger. I would say if you're just starting out running this, I wouldn't even worry about this. Because these have, like, big actual effects that occur with them. That are less about just plain stat increases and more about giving a big benefit, usually of a narrative edge. I haven't even really touched these yet, but there's definitely ways that you can. Designing battles. Real easy. Like how many battles? Like we said, 3 easy battles before the players are going to need to like rest or recharge inventory points. This is a big one there. 2 normal battles, or 1 normal battle and 1 easy battle, or 1 hard battle. Enemies always come in varieties of levels of 5. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, so on and so forth. You never have to worry about anything else in there. And easy battles are equal to the number of player characters minus 1. Normals are equal to the number of player characters. Yeah, this is very true. This is very, very true. I have, in some instances, been like, I'll throw in 1 extra enemy. That's a hard fight. That absolutely is a hard fight. Regular enemies will always like roll a die or have random selection as to what player character they attack. It's the champions, the bosses, that are intelligent enough to like pick out, they're going to hit you this turn, they're going to hit you this turn, so on and so forth. So yeah, like battles are difficult, not because you, the game master, are using tactics to disrupt and disband, but instead it's just a numbers game. If you have more, if you're rolling more on your side, it's going to be harder for your players to be successful. Oh, let me do this. We are listening to Spotify music. Let me put this on. I thought I already did. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? There we go. There we are. Perfect. But yeah, so that kind of thing can be really important. It's really just a numbers game. You very rarely ever want to go over the number of your player characters at the table. Very rarely. If you're doing like a dungeon, like we talked about earlier, and there's a lot of enemies and encounters in there, just throw a lot of easy battles at them. Because they'll be able to go through more of those, they'll be able to go through them faster, and then they'll be able to say like, okay, we actually need to like pick ourselves up or rest or start recharging these inventory points that we have. And you can even design your dungeon and dungeon rewards around that. Like, yeah, there's no inventory points at the beginning of the dungeon as the players are going through it, but the last few rooms, yeah, the enemy drops an inventory point over there in the corner. They make a check, they find 3. And they can distribute them amongst themselves as they like. As a way to, like, get them back those inventory points. Or, like, in the dungeon, it's just a bunch of monsters and stuff, but further in, they find a merchant, and if they free that merchant, they'll give them a few free inventory points and then refill the rest that players can buy. Elites and champions are pretty interesting. Elites are just 2 soldiers of the same level, so it's just 1 enemy that is tougher. Elites perform 2 turns per round instead of 1 like regular soldiers, and champions are usually 2 or more regular enemies that are called soldiers, and for every soldier that they are representing, they get a number of actions. So for instance, a boss fight with a boss fight with 4 player characters. Boss fight with 4 player characters would be a champion that has the power of 4 soldiers for a normal fight, 3 soldiers for an easy boss fight, or 5 for a hard boss fight. And a lot of those, again, are just kind of like, by number of soldiers they're replacing, you're just kind of taking the idea of like how much HP that soldier has and then multiplying it by that number. This is easy math to do, but there is a website that's really helpful called Fultimator, or you can search for Fabula Ultima Monster Maker. It'll take you to the same website. This is an online tool that you can use on your phone, tablet, or computer. You can put some points in, you can slide some sliders around, and it does all this math for you. It also keeps a bestiary for you, which means as you make monsters and NPCs, they're just kind of added in this bestiary that you have available. I think the only thing it's missing is an easy, like, copy and paste option to like move it to a Word document or Markdown so that you can have it on another website that you like make these kind of books with. Beyond that, though, it's really good. Levels and ranks. Yeah, combat's usually pretty quick. 3 to 4 rounds of what I've seen are pretty quick. Random targeting, we talked about this before. A lot of new players don't know this. But the default method of choosing targets is random. Simply assign a number to each member of the player character's side and determine the target of attacks, spells, and skills by rolling die. Yeah, easy. Easy, easy, easy. You can say, like, this enemy is going to use this spell or this skill, but against who? Roll a die. Easy. And then swarms are just... treat all these creatures as like a single swarm. If you want to turn the creature into a swarm, just do it. The creature's going to be the same. It's just described as like smaller beings narratively within a scene. So yeah, it's just easy to do that with. A swarm of enemies is just 1 enemy of that type, and you're like, yeah, just a lot of weaklings of it. Obstacles and gimmicks like waves, reinforcements, defenders, like shielding allies from attacks. Like you got to get rid of the guy in front to get to the guys in the back. That can make for some interesting fights as well. I haven't really done a whole lot of that yet, just putting different kinds of enemies and resistances in certain areas. And then environmental effects. Lair actions is kind of the thing. Or rising danger. After a certain number of rounds, this thing happens and occurs. All sorts of fun shit that you can do with it. Making monsters is really cool and really fun, including like routines. The creatures perform actions in the same order round after round. This option makes battles slightly easier to manage, but it makes it feel really video gamey. So if that's what people want, if that's what they're there for, routines are great. They're like mechanics in Final Fantasy XIV. It can be really, really done well. Yeah, what else am I mean, this is all like how to design them. All of this stuff is just by the book itself. You'll give it a die array, give it like some basic attacks, whatever the case might be. Accuracy checks may rely on attributes you choose, so they can be whatever you want. NPC has skills, they'll gain skill points based on their level, and those skill points can be used for a variety of different things, but it's kind of like making a character, right? Like Dex is their the Dex die is their defense, their insight is their magic defense, MP is their willpower, maximum MP is their might, just like player characters are. So you don't have to learn anything new or crazy else. It all just kind of works as is. And then these are the different like species, different types, and some of them have different things. Like constructs are immune to poison damage, resistant to earth damage, and immune to poison. Just on dint of them being constructs. And then to start, you'll choose 2 additional skills from a list here. So they can be like resistant to a damage, that's a skill point. They can fly, that's a skill point. Or improve defenses. They can get a +2 to defense, +1 to match defense. That's a skill point. And you can just do that to enemy groups or like an enemy that you're creating, especially with this online tool, and it will tell you you've used this many skills. That's great. You can gain more skills by making them weak to certain elemental types. And this is a guide as well. You can create really gimmicky enemies, like something like a Tonberry. Which is like a small enemy that kind of like makes its way towards the players and then deals a shit ton of damage and like takes someone out of a scene. You know, or deals a bunch of damage or inflicts every status condition on them. You absolutely could do that. And the whole thing is a gimmick. The whole fight is a gimmick to get rid of this enemy before this stuff happens. You absolutely could do that. You know, or like D&D trolls that recover HP if they're not dealt fire damage. So you can make them resistant to fire damage, so they take less from it, but it stops them from healing. So players want to deal at least 1 thing of fire damage per round to it, and then just beat the shit out of it, doing anything else, so they don't heal. All sorts of stuff. And then spells as well. The baseline for spells, you can call these whatever you want. And also kind of make up extra stuff that you might want using this as a guide. It's a really easy, straightforward guide to make. And then there's a couple of pages that go through like making a boss, what that looks like, the mental processes of making a boss, and what that's going to look like, and how you think about making a boss enemy, and the different rules, and then a bestiary. Which goes over all the different points of like a monster stat block and how to read it. And then it will give you somewhere down here like all these beasts. Here's a caterpillar, it's level 5. You can easily change this to a level 10 or level 15 if you want to, or take those stats and make it a different kind of creature if you want to, or change their vulnerabilities around. Like almost 1-for-1, the system for making creatures in this game is easy, because if I want to have something like a caterpillar or a giant rat in a game, if I want them to be vulnerable to lightning damage instead of fire damage, then I just say, great, they're vulnerable to lightning instead of fire. And it works out the exact same way, right? Like, I don't have to redesign the creature, I don't have to do all this crazy stuff, it just works as is. Really, really easy, really, really, really straightforward to make a creature. I think I've even shown Full Tomato on stream before when talking about Fabula Ultima. But if you do a Google search of Fabula Ultima Creature Maker or Monster Maker, it will pop up. It's a tool that's independently published. The designer knows about it and talks about using it frequently. And says like, yes, you should be using this because it's a great tool. Yeah, it goes into other enemy types here and things like that. These are great points of inspiration, especially like something like this, to be like, yes, it can absolutely have crazy ass rules, and that's just a skill point, right? Like, this is not like 5 or 6 skill points you need. Like, yeah, for a skill, give it a crazy rule, and it does this thing. It's real nice. I think this is just like a PDF thing. I don't know if that's anything in it. But there we go. Your story has just begun. So yeah, what I've learned is making monsters in Fabula Ultima is fantastically easy. It is phenomenally easy to do, and it's a lot of fun. More than any other system that asks you to do a ton of math or anything like that. Fabula Ultima creatures are like, yeah, I just imagine this doing this, it's weak to this. It function this way. Hold on. Sorry, everybody. The beautiful fiance and Tato just headbutted each other in like a... I guess a holding your ground or establishing dominance.
I was reaching down to pick up a toy to throw for her, and she was jumping up to play with me. We were both doing the same thing.
This is an accident. You're okay, sweet girl. It's okay. More surprised than anything. Like, Jesus. But yeah, running, like, again, that battle, that 1, 2, 3 of fights and running fights that way, super easy. And it is this rigid, right? Like easy fights, like 3 easy fights, 2 normal fights, or 1 normal and 1 easy, or 1 hard fight before players need to be like, we need to rest. Something I have learned, which is a little different, and you'll need to explain this to players, is that unlike D&D, and more like Pathfinder, where D&D players just say, we're resting, and they get stuff. Much like Pathfinder, players need to recover everything manually. So the only time they automatically get stuff back is when a player uses 4 inventory points for a magic tent. And that just says that's a full rest, everybody, the whole party gets all their HP, all their MP back. Hooray, you get them. But if you're not using that, then at that point, players need to manually recover that and manually recover those things. Status conditions can be a big deal because players either have to use inventory points to recover from them or spells to recover from them, which means they're using mana or mind points to recover from them, which means they're using inventory points to get that mind point back. So in many cases, as my players are littered with status conditions because enemies have hit them or caused them or cast spells that cause them, at the end of those fights, players are like, can we rest and get rid of these? And the answer is no. They have to use items or spells to rid themselves of status conditions. They do not just clear those out. And so then players are kind of mathing out like, okay, you cast that spell, I'll use inventory points to restore your MP, and then player C will use a magic tent and we get all of our stuff back. So that you're clear of status conditions and we get everything, right? Yes, absolutely. But even then, even then, everything does come back to inventory points. Those are so important in managing inventory points, which is why I like them. It's important that players use their inventory points for potions and items to gain abilities and recover, but it's not so important that you need to write down the minutia of like, well, I have 3, I have 2 of this, I have 1 of the better ones. They just work. You just spend those points and heal yourself, or you get resources back, and it's an easy way to tell, like, I can only do this 1 or 2 more times, and then I'm out. It also makes for great rewards. A Zenit will restore an inventory point, which means 10 Zenit equals 1 inventory point. So if you want to refill, if you're, again, like in a dungeon or on an adventure, and there's no place for them to restore it, you can give them inventory points directly, and say, hey, you have these, you can refill these right now. Or say like, yeah, that enemy had 20 Zenit on them. That's enough for 2 inventory points for them to get as soon as they can, without like dipping into other funds they might have accumulated or that they're trying to save up for cool stuff. So it's like inventory points for later that they can use and get access to. The game system's real tight. It's real tight. Like the game designer says earlier in their work, you don't have to do a lot of changing to this game system. It's going to work just fine. I usually, in the games I've run, I use every single experience point variant to give more experience points to my players. That seems to work out just fine. I would recommend doing the same, especially with fights. The variant for fights, I'm not sure what page it's on here. It'd take too much time to look. But to summarize it, you'll have a clock that starts at 5. And then at the top of every round, you reduce that clock by 1. And whenever the fight is done, whatever that clock is at is how many extra experience points the players get. So like an easy fight, the idea behind that is that if players are just whacking away, physical damage, just attacking, fights are going to take a while. But if players are studying enemies, using elemental powers or abilities, or attacking with elemental damage in some way that enemies are weak to, they can easily kill enemies in like 1 or 2 shots. And that's the point. It'll make a fight faster, it'll make a fight quicker. And that's great incentive to dangle to ensure that like they're moving this along. So good. So I use that all the time. And then the other ones allow for players to reward themselves for role-playing well and making good plays and good choices during a fight and during the game as well. So I recommend using them. They're simple, they're easy to get and understand. Players will understand like, oh, okay, yeah, that's the thing to do. But kind of hammering home the point of fight should be quick, and you'll want to try to learn what enemies are weak to use that against them, because that'll just help you out tremendously. Because enemies are strong, enemies are tough. So you either want to outnumber them quickly, or make sure that you're just dealing damage to them fast. Beyond that, the last thing that I've learned real quick before we sign off is that when you're helping players make characters, their identity, theme, and origin is a big part to their character, much more so than the classes they've chosen. It's backwards from stuff like D&D, where if you want to play something like a barbarian, you know what your stats are going to be, you know you're going to have rage, the mechanics you have access to, and so your character is informed. Your roleplay is informed by those mechanics that you get access to, because those are the only ones you get access to, and it takes more work to get access to other ones. And there's a core part to like being a barbarian that, you know, is your stats, your skill proficiencies, all of that, and that informs your roleplay. Here, your identity gives you your identity, theme, and origin gives you rerolls. The bonds you have with other players or nouns, people, places, things, get you modifiers to every roll you make, and those are really powerful. And so players want to use those things. Beyond that, the classes gives them access to like skills and things that they can do in fights or in combats or in interacting with NPCs around the world. A couple of exploration powers, but not a whole lot. But generally speaking, those powers they'll use when they're applicable. But because they're picking from 2 to 3 different classes right at character creation, that's going to matter less than their identity, who they are, who their character is, who they say their character is. And so during character creation, I would really hone in the point that the role play is going to come from how they describe their character, who their character is, what they want their character arc to be, and less of what skills they have access to. This is something that some player characters have had a hard time, that players have had a hard time with, grappling with. But a lot of those players might be coming from D&D or Pathfinder, where their mechanics inform their roleplay. Here, the roleplay informs the mechanics. It's not backwards, but it's in the opposite direction than what they might be used to. So it would really help players out to kind of explain to them those things are really important, because that's going to be where like the vast majority of roleplay is, and how you interact with everything, and how you get access to rerolls, how you get access to modifiers, which is all good and is going to help you be way more successful everywhere you go. Yeah, that was kind of it for me. I wanted to talk about being a game master because some folks had it. No one really piped up with questions, but again, always feel free to ask. This is immediately going to be available on the YouTube as a VOD. So if anybody has any questions about Fabula Ultima, even if you didn't make it live, feel free to ask in the comments and I'll do what I can to answer them. Or other people that are watching might answer those questions for you as well. And that's good to do, because any and all of that information is just good to have. But yeah, this cover's great. I love this cover. Anyway, everybody, that's it for me for tonight in its entirety. We looked at 2 TTRPGs, talked about one we had already looked at. Fabula Ultima is my current favorite TTRPG system. It hits all the nostalgia buttons for me in just the right way, but it's also a really great roleplay first system with a lot of freedom for character creation that isn't too complicated. And the system is just stupid easy to run and manage. It really is. It gets the hell out of the way. So a lot of your prep is easy or fun. It's just, it's so damn easy to run this game. It's so easy. And unlike what a lot of people think, where this is just the anime game, it really isn't. A lot of the plots and things that I've run have very little to do with anime in general. They're the same kind of plots that I would run in like D&D or Pathfinder. The only difference is that I just go ham with the fantasy on this one, because it's very high fantasy. And that's it. If you have any other questions for me about Fabula Ultima or Fabula Ultima in general, again, feel free to let me know in the comments in the YouTube video down below, past the badum-dum, whatever it is, and descriptions and all that. And I'll try to keep my eye open for those and answer as often as I can. But until next time, until next Friday, have a great day, everybody. Have a great rest of your night. Have a great rest of your weekend. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to others. Play games. Play more games. And I will see you on the next one. Goodbye, everybody.